Hi, agency consultant Karl Sakas here, joining you from North Carolina. Welcome to Agency Office Hours, live Q&A every second Tuesday of the month. This is Agency Office Hours from Sakas & Company for July 2022. Halfway through the year already, time flies. Every month, I answer questions from agency leaders like you about how to grow and run your agency more smoothly. Here's a preview of the questions that I will be answering today. First up, Ian from New Jersey has a question around how much agency owners should pay themselves, owner comp. Then, Katie in Barcelona has a question about recruiting. Specifically, how do you scale up a high-quality team of copywriters at your agency? Then we'll talk about leadership. And if you're joining us live, a question for you in chat to share, what is the highest impact feedback you've ever received as a leader? Then Megan in Boston has a question also about hiring. Specifically, if you're growing rapidly, there's a lot of client demand. How do you hire ahead of demand without hurting your profit margins? And finally, final question for today. If you have recently hired or are preparing to hire a number two, a chief operating officer, COO, or something along those lines, what should be on their 30, 60, 90-day ramp-up plan? We'll dig into that. If you have a question you'd like to ask at a future office hours, please include it when you RSVP, and we'll let you know beforehand if you're on the list. And as a reminder, we are recording and we'll be publishing today's office hours. Don't share anything out loud that you don't want to become public later. All right. So first up, our first question today is from Ian in New Jersey. We just got a note from Ian right before office hours. He has a last-minute sales call, so he will not be joining live. However, I will be answering his question anyway, since everyone can benefit from getting clear on how much to pay yourself as an owner, or if you're not an owner, supporting the owners on reaching their goals, because that'll help you reach your goals. All right, so here's the question. Ian asked, how much should an agency owner pay themselves? This is certainly an it depends question. You know, some of it comes down to how many owners are there, how big is your agency, what are your profit margins, but let's talk about some benchmarks. And if you're joining us live, my colleague Kate has shared some links in chat with some additional resources. So as a starting point, if you're an agency owner, you've taken on a lot of risk. Running an agency is difficult. The question in my consulting that people almost never ask me is, should I even be running an agency in the first place? It is hard work. Most people don't ask that. So if you're doing this hard work, you're taking on the risk of running a business, especially a services business where there are people on the client side and on the team side, you're ideally getting paid reasonably for the risk you're taking on. What does that look like? Well, ideally, your agency has 20 to 30% net profit margins. That is, out of all the revenue in, you have 20 to 30% left over after covering overhead and labor. Labor, by the way, includes owner compensation, employees, and key contractors, people that are working on things on an ongoing basis. So 20 to 30% net profit margins, but ideally you're also paying yourself a salary, and that's within the 50 to 60%, that is at least six figures. If you're an owner, you're paying yourself less than $100,000 a year or equivalent in your local currency, you're probably underpaying yourself relative to the risk and the stress that you've taken on. Now, I'll typically see agency salaries go up to $400,000 and even $500,000 a year. That would be on very much the high side. What most people do is they combine salary, kind of ongoing payroll, with owner's distributions or draw, which, talk to your accountant, aren't taxable in the same way. Now, some people might wonder, well, could I just pay myself $1 in salary and do the draw and save on taxes? I don't recommend that because the tax authority will find out and you will get in trouble because they want the payroll taxes. So talk to your accountant for guidance on the best mix and match kind of situation, but it is normal to get a salary. Ideally, should be six figures, so 100 to maybe 500,000 plus a draw as well. It's normal for the agency to do distributions to cover your estimated tax bill and things like that. And of course, you have a range of benefits as well. Could be things like health insurance coverage, could be a wide range of other things. I have a client in Virginia where one of the benefits is a $200 a year budget for tattoo reimbursement. To clarify, it does not have to be the agency's logo, although there is an agency in Florida that took a bunch of their team to get the agency's logo tattooed on like a dozen team members. So that's an option. A client in Denver does pet adoption reimbursement, right? So if you're adopting a pandemic puppy or a kitten or what have you, the agency will help out, things like that. So there are various benefits. As an owner, you have access to additional kind of reimbursements that you might not have as an employee. And so really there are a wide range of options. So, you know, it might be on paper, your salary is 100, but maybe you do a draw that gets you up to 200. There's some additional benefits that you might not get as an employee that push it even higher. Plus, of course, covering estimated taxes. So talk to your accountant about what is right for you. And I've, thanks to Kate, we've shared an article in chat that digs a bit deeper on owner compensation. And also, if you have, in the article, we look at a few common scenarios to give you some ideas on mixing and matching. One item that is maybe not ideal, and by the way, if you're joining us live, feel free to share in chat. Do you have any unique benefits for you as the owner or for the owners at your agency? Sometimes agencies will do a company car where they will lease a car that the company is paying for the owner to use. That's not really a business necessity for most agencies. Like legally, you probably can talk to your accountant, but it's kind of pushing the need for things, you know, is that the best thing to do versus say covering your mileage reimbursement? Talk to your accountant to be sure. So if you have anything you'd like to add related to owner compensation or benefits, feel free to share that in chat. And in the meantime, though, we will move on to our next question, which is from Katie in Barcelona about recruiting. Katie, if you want to bring yourself on, here we go, and let me update that. There we go. All right. So Katie, welcome to Agency Office Hours.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question, Carl.
So you submitted a question about recruiting and staffing, specifically for your content-led SEO agency. What is the key to hiring writers, copywriters at scale? If you could share a bit more about the challenge you're running into and about your agency, and then we'll dig in.
Yes,
also,
sure.
Make sure to get model releases from everyone standing behind you. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So yeah, there's two parts to it. As you mentioned, I work for a content-led SEO agency. So we're producing a lot of high quality content on a regular basis. We worked a lot with freelance writers when we first started out, but now we've grown and we've built an in-house content team who are all fantastic, and we're still growing. The thing is, we're finding it really hard to attract really high quality applicants, really high quality writers into our application process. So the application process itself is somewhat automated and templated. It's not that's particularly manual or that's taking up too much time.
Right.
But I'm aware that to find just one great writer, we should probably be reviewing hundreds of applications, and we're just not getting that. So I'm wondering first if you have any advice on how to get people into our application funnel, and then secondly, although I did just say that application process is somewhat automated.
Yeah.
We are still asking each person to provide samples. We
Mhm.
ask them to do a paid test, and we're onboarding them mostly onto our systems already, because we
Okay.
want to know that they're also process oriented. But sometimes then that's already taking 3 weeks to find out that then maybe they didn't pass the test based on the content that they wrote. So that's where we're
Okay.
at.
So let's look at this from two perspectives. And by the way, for everyone who's listening live, feel free to share what is your top tip related to recruiting, whether it's writers or otherwise, and whether it's at scale or not. Please share in chat. What is your top tip for recruiting? So, Katie, let's take a look at this. Let's look at each question separately. So the first question ultimately is, how do we get more copywriters to apply for the opening at our agency in the first place? So thinking about it, one piece is, where are you sourcing people in the first place? You know, are you sharing, for instance, kind of general social media, or are you posting about the role in, say, writer-specific Facebook groups and communities and things like that? So if we think about distribution, question for you, Katie, is where are you getting the posting in front of people?
Yes, we are. We're distributing it on all of the channels that you've just mentioned.
Okay.
We initially started out with, it's always sort of writer or freelance or marketing or digital workers based groups.
Got it.
All the sort of main social media ones, so LinkedIn and Facebook. Then we've gone more down the like Slack community route, because I've noticed that they seem to house a lot of fantastic creatives.
Yes.
So we found some really good Slack groups where we've had most success. I found most success in Slack groups, LinkedIn groups, creative and remote working jobs boards, so paid jobs boards. I'm not just putting it on free places. I'm putting it on paid jobs board and trying to target digital marketing, digital creative industries, this kind of thing. And then just LinkedIn, Slack communities and word of mouth have been our most successful places so far.
Okay, so you're posting it in the right places, it sounds like. So that's good news. There's a question about the actual application and basically kind of what you're offering. You know, if we think about direct marketing, you know, traditionally direct marketing is the list, the creative, and the offer. So from a list perspective, it sounds like you're getting in front of the right people. So that's good. From a creative perspective, to what extent are you making your writing opportunity stand out from all of the others that are getting shared? Like what is unique about working as a writer for your agency versus anyone else?
This is something that we're also trying to improve. We do have, it's a fantastic company culture, and everybody that works for the company will preach that, you know. So we're trying to get that into the application process as well somehow. We actually do record. We have members of, we have the head of content who's here, Rob, record a loop to say, I would be your potential manager. This is what it's like to work here. We're now going one step further and just getting some of the other content team members to do the same thing.
Great.
So hopefully that will help. But yeah, apart from that, we think internally that our offer's pretty good. Like it's a decent pay for the industry average. We offer good benefits. It's fully remote. As far as I can see, we're ticking all the boxes that we think we should tick. But yeah, I think it maybe is just about bringing out what really makes us shine. I mean, everyone's remote now. Everybody is up in their game in this state, right? So I guess maybe that could be a thing. We're just in. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Well, I would say the good news is there are companies that are trying to get people back in the office. So if you can say, you know, we are remote first, and we are not going to make you come into an office because we don't have an office, you know, or something like that. I would. It is still worth highlighting. There are plenty of companies that are trying to drag people back in the office, and you can stand out to say that's not us.
Yeah, exactly, because it's not, we don't, there are a few of us here in Barcelona just coincidentally, but we really are worldwide.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
happy for people to be worldwide and to work on their own schedules too. I was just going to add, we are creating a careers page on our website. So that's something that we didn't have before, and we will have it now. So it's not just going to be reliant on every time me or the HR administrator or the head of content
Yeah.
posts on their LinkedIn. It's actually going to be a space where we could attract inbound leads for people that are just that know the brand, or that are perhaps just searching and curious. So that will be on there, and we're really going to try and hone in on the people first mentality, the community, and that kind of thing.
That's good to hear. And for everyone listening, think about ways you can frame your agency not just as a brand for your prospective clients, but also as an employer brand, that is, as a place to work. And the employer brand stuff also will help on a client perspective, right? Because if the client sees that people seem relatively happy, that's probably a good sign about the work they're going to get in terms of marketing, creative, technical, and so on. So I think, Katie, good to hear that you're adding the new section. Definitely like the idea of having video and other content from people talking about what it's like to work at your agency versus another. I would also recommend having a couple of your latest hires sit down and get feedback from them, so they can give you feedback about what they noticed, how you stood out versus others, and get their editing suggestions. If they are writers, they're probably going to help you make the writing even better in the post itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a really good idea. Thank you.
So then the second question is this. So first, we looked at how do you get more people in the funnel in the first place. The second question is this. Once someone is already in the hiring process, how do you make sure you focus on the people who are the right match and not waste your time on people who are the wrong match? In the sales process, I think of that as building a fast fail sales process. That is, if a prospect is not a good match, then, in that case, you want to find out as soon as possible. That's the fast fail, right? If they're going to fail up front. And failure isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? If someone reaches out to me and they're not a good match as a sales prospect, I'll let them know up front. Like, no need to waste their time going back and forth further. And when possible, I'll point them somewhere else if someone's a better match. So, with that in mind, my recommendation, Katie, and for everyone who's listening, who's responsible for recruiting and hiring at your agency, take a look at the steps in your hiring process. And at each step, identify, where do you typically have people drop out? For instance, is there something in the application where it mentions, for instance, that they understand that it's fully remote, and some people may not want that. If they say yes or no or what have you, does that automatically move them forward or drop them out? I would look for what are those potential toll booth or fast fail steps. And if you find that there are some steps where people are dropping out pretty late in the process, but reasonably you could ask those questions or do the activities early, I would look for ways to move that earlier in the process. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely does make sense. I think we do try to do that. We probably could do it a little bit more. The thing we're finding is they seem to be ticking all the boxes all the way through to that stage. We actually get them to record a loop as part of the application process, and send a sample and write a short intro to a SAS article. So I don't know whether that maybe is already too much. But then we're onboarding them into our project management system. We're putting them through the outline, the first draft, because their sample looked great. But then by the time that they write a first draft for actually a brief that we've written, it just doesn't live up to standard. So I'm just wondering if anybody has any advice of maybe how to cut that process shorter, but perhaps not. Perhaps that's what we need to do to get quality.
In some cases it may be, and by the way, please, people who are going live, share in chat. I know, Aaron, thank you for the note, recruiting by showcasing the team on social media. Lately, a lot of good posts, good people from free LinkedIn job posts. That actually is where Kate on my team, how I found her. I posted various paid things, but she came via a not paid LinkedIn post. Kate, I'm curious if you don't mind joining. Was there anything you recall that stood out about the Sakas and Company post versus all of the others that you were seeing?
I think the post itself, Karl has his own style of writing, and it's personable, it's friendly, it's helpful. And so the job posting came through and it read differently than the others I was seeing. He also emphasized that we were fully remote and I would never be forced to go to the office. And that was something I was looking for. And so I kind of applied and just said, well, who knows? It's LinkedIn. There's a lot of applicants, fingers crossed, but his interview process was pretty lengthy, including a paid hiring assessment, several interviews with members of the team. And so getting through all of those points helped him see that I was the best candidate and helped me see that I really liked everyone I was interacting with and the work that I was going to be doing.
Okay, thank you. And part of that also included for Katie, front loading some of the sort of lighter lift. So the paid assessment was just about at the very end, and so, some people maybe did an initial conversation with my COO, Diane. If someone wasn't a good match there, they would drop out then, right? They didn't do any further work, kind of thing, to avoid wasting their time. Also, when it came to doing the paid assessment, I mentioned that a limited number of people were doing it. So they didn't feel like, well, is everyone doing this kind of thing? So like, for instance, the Loom video, there's a question on, if they're client facing, the Loom video may be helpful. On the other hand, if the video doesn't, if people end up stopping and they're like, forget this, I don't want to do a video, it may make sense to move that a bit later. So you'll need to decide what is right for you, but I think getting feedback from your recent hires will give you some ideas of things to optimize. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And that's something that I don't think we had thought of maybe altering the order of the things that we're asking for. Perhaps we don't need everything all at once. Perhaps it is putting people off. Perhaps we just bring that in at different stages. So thank you. And thank you. I can see people have wrote in the chat as well some articles that I'm going to check out. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Katie, thank you very much. Let me know how it goes. And one more note I wanted to highlight from chat. Jack, thank you for the suggestion. You mentioned you brought in a team member specifically because your work from home, noting this can be a big positive. And indeed, the employee has to be self-starter and able to deal with the distractions of being at home. But yeah, that is still a recruiting strength. So coming up, we'll be talking about a couple things. We will look at how to hire without hurting your profit margins. Question from Megan in Boston. And if you are currently hiring a COO or other number two, what should they be doing in their first 30, 60 to 90 days? So we'll have the 30, 60, 90, and then Meg's question about profit margins. But before that, a word from our sponsor, me. Today's Agency Office Hours is sponsored by the new Agency Leadership Intensive from my team at Sakas and Company. This is about the power of getting life-changing feedback. If you're joining us live today, feel free to share in chat. I would love to hear from you. What is the highest impact feedback you have ever received? It could be from a boss, it could be from a coworker, it could be from a client, it could be from someone else in your life. Maybe you were flying somewhere and the person next to you on the plane, as you were sharing your life story and they were sharing yours, maybe they shared some feedback that changed your life. If you could share in chat, what is the highest impact feedback you've received? And to start, I'm going to share the highest impact that I have ever gotten. It was about a decade ago. My boss, I was the head of operations at a small agency. My boss said that she was sending me to a week-long leadership retreat to help me up-level my leadership as the head of operations. The program, since then, 10 years later, of course, it's gone up in price and pay for travel and so on. Ultimately today, this would be about a $6,000 commitment for the week. Not cheap. And part of the process was that you would get 360 feedback. If you ever done a 360-degree feedback survey, you circulate that around to your peers, bosses, subordinates, ideally, everyone you might have worked with over the years, not just your current job, and you get their feedback. What's working, what's not. Now, as head of operations, I'd worked at a couple agencies, I'd worked with clients for years. I figured I was pretty self-aware. I figured the feedback would be, helpful, but, I don't know, I would know it already. I was wrong. I was not as self-aware as I thought, because when I got to the retreat and got the report of feedback, it was very different from what I expected. Yes, the report said I was good at getting things done. That's what colleagues had said. But I also wasn't very good at making it fun for everyone around me. I was something of a taskmaster, not too focused on team morale. I also would talk over people in meetings. People maybe liked the results I got, but they didn't really enjoy working with me. Ouch. Or as one of the other participants at the leadership retreat said, you can't be a leader if no one wants to follow you. Yeah. So that was difficult feedback to get, but I knew that they were right. I could see doing most of the stuff that came up in the 360 feedback. The easy choice, of course, would have been to do nothing, right? I'd already gotten to a certain point. I was the number 2 person at the agency. I didn't have to do anything further. But I realized I had an opportunity. I want to be the best I can be. I want to reach my potential. I want to get better. So based on the feedback, I made a list of things to work through. That included doing some leadership training, included leaning in on my volunteer leadership activities, and after launching what's now Sakas & Company, hiring a business coach. How did it turn out? Well, it worked out pretty well. The volunteer group, the American Marketing Association chapter, under my leadership, we became number 2 in North America, in part by practicing what I'd learned since then. I read the book, The Human Brand, which introduced me to the concept of warmth and competence. You may have seen my writing about warmth and competence. I apply that within my team. That's been a huge impact. And then in my consulting and coaching work, I've worked with hundreds of agencies all over the world to help them and their teams. And I guess we could say thousands if we include group programs, content, and so on. So really that advice, good at getting things done, not at making it fun, changed my life and indirectly made things better for everyone around me. I don't talk over people in meetings anymore. Fortunately, it doesn't require spending $6,000 in a week of your time to get that kind of feedback. That is why I created the Agency Leadership Intensive. It's a new leadership development program specifically for you as an agency owner or top executive. There's an exclusive cohort, so you have to apply. You don't just get in. And it's 100% virtual, so you can join from anywhere in the world. There is a mini 360-degree survey, so you can get feedback. We'll give you a template to circulate to get feedback from people you've worked with over the years, both currently and otherwise, to help you identify what you want to change. And we'll also create a 60-day plan to help you move things forward. Plus, you'll also have the support of the agency leaders that are in your cohort as you're helping each other up-level your agencies by up-leveling your leadership. If you're interested, click the link in chat or in the description to learn more and apply. Onboarding. All right, so I look forward to reading your Agency Leadership Intensive application. So let's talk about COO ramp-up plan, 30, 60, 90, and then we'll take Megan's question related to hiring without hurting your profit margins. So the question we got was from an agency leader who asked to remain anonymous. It sounds like they're currently sorting through some things at their agency. So we're going to answer this particular question anonymously. And here is the question. What should be in a new agency COO's 30, 60, 90-day plan? As with many things, the answer depends, but let's dig in on that. Keep in mind that a COO role, Chief Operating Officer, is unique at every agency and at every time and place for that particular agency. As they describe in the book Riding Shotgun, the role of the COO, a COO role tends to be crafted uniquely to each business and to the CEO that they're working with. In some businesses, the COO has been brought in to be the integrator to support the visionary CEO. In other cases, the COO is there to do a turnaround. They're not going to be there forever, but they're there to get things sorted out, and then they'll move on. In other cases, the COO is being trained to eventually step into the CEO role if they make it. So keep in mind, the role is different. The 30, 60, 90 is going to vary depending on the long-term goal for your COO, or for you if you are the COO. There's also a big difference on COO roles within agencies around the scope of what they are overseeing. The narrowest scope would be the COO is overseeing internal business operations. That can vary, but that often includes things like finance, recruiting, and HR, sometimes your internal marketing, things related to that. It could be a P&L related, profit and loss carrying COO role, where the COO is in charge of delivery. Basically, anyone who's doing billable work is going to report to the COO. And the broadest scope of an agency COO role is they are basically leading everything at the agency except for growth. So the CEO is at the top. They probably have an assistant. They have someone leading sales and marketing, growth, partnerships, and things like that. And then the COO reports to them, and everyone else other than growth reports to the COO. I mention that because there's not a one size fits all. But if we are to think in general, what should be in a COO's 30, 60, 90 plan? Here's where I'd focus. First, in their first 30 days, the COO's job is to get to know what is going on. They shouldn't run into things like a bull in a china shop and start changing everything immediately. Why? Because they don't know what's going on. They don't have context on things. The first 30 days for a new COO at your agency should be to get the lay of the land, understand what's going on. If you have a new person joining soon, my recommendation is that you identify, who are the people they should meet in the first week? What are the people they should meet in the first 2 weeks? Who are the people they should meet in the first month? Is there anyone where maybe you could wait a bit longer? That'll help them prioritize because they can't read your mind. In the second, and so 30s, then we're looking at the first 60 days. They've gotten a general sense of what's going on. Now it's time to start looking for quick wins. These are things that can make your agency better without requiring too much in terms of time or cash to make it happen. Here's a small example, but one that was impactful for the particular agency. A number of years ago, I did a culture survey for a new client, small agency, that was an anonymous survey of everyone on the team to ask about what was working, what wasn't working, things like that. One of the questions was asking every person, if you were suddenly CEO for the day, what is the first thing you would do? Got a range of answers. One of the responses was this: I would buy a new coffee maker. It was a very specific thing. And I mean, as someone who loves coffee, I understand. So, in my follow-up report, I mentioned that as a potential quick win for the owners. And it turned out the two owners didn't drink coffee. They had heard there were some issues with the coffee maker, but they didn't use it, so it wasn't really their problem. My advice was, and they were in a relatively small office, spend $100 to $200 on a new coffee maker, and you were going to make someone very happy. And they did. So your new COO should be looking in the first 60 days for potential quick wins. You probably don't want to predefine what those are. You may have something in mind that you've been meaning to fix, but let them identify what they recommend, right? You've hired them to think, don't think for them. And then if we're thinking 30, 60, 90 for your new COO, and by the way, if you're joining us live, feel free to share, what do you put in a new hire's ramp-up plan? You know, what do you expect from them, 30, 60, 90 days? If we're looking at 90 days, first 90 days, now it's time for the COO to start identifying long-term initiatives. There may be things that are off track that were part of why you hired them. There may be other things that they uncover as part of their onboarding process. The first 90 days, it's time for them to start making the bigger initiatives happen. Unlike the quick wins, they're not going to complete all of the big initiatives in that first period of time, but they're doing some triage and getting things started. If you are joining us live, we've shared some links in chat, a COO job description that you can access, why it's time to bring in a number 2 if you've been on the fence about that. Also, my article about creating a new hire ramp-up plan, including 7 sample templates for your new hires, including an operations person, what to put in their new hire ramp-up plan. And, you know, Kate, before we move on to Megan's question related to how do you avoid hiring ahead of demand, Kate, a question for you. You know, when you joined Sakas and Company, I identified, rather than a 30, 60, 90, I set it up as week 1, month 2, 3, so on through the end of the year. What was that like to have a clear plan about what to work on when?
Yeah, it was incredibly helpful as a new employee coming into the business in a new role, seeing what Karl's expectations were on a week 1, getting sorted, meeting everybody, figuring out my place, and then month 1 through month 12, what his expectations were. It was easy to stay on top of them and exceed them because I had what they were all listed out. And he put a lot of effort into that before I joined. Onboarding starts earlier than you think. And Karl definitely exceeded, making my transition into the company really, really smooth.
Thank you. The other thing that I noticed, and this is true for everyone listening for any new hire or a promotion internally as well, you can nail down when you think certain things should happen. So for instance, you know, week 1, are they getting the week 1 things done? Month 1, are they? This is especially important if you're hiring a salesperson. You don't want to find out a year later that they can't sell, and a ramp-up plan can help. In the case of Kate, you know, Kate was doing like month 2 stuff in month 1, and in month 3, she was doing month 6 things. You can see if someone is on track or ahead. And in fact, she recently got promoted early to operations manager. So congrats to Kate. And her progress on the ramp-up plan was a key part of that. Kate, anything else you'd add before we shift over to Meg or Megan with her question, or shift over to Megan's question?
I think the only other thing with having your expectations for your Karl's trajectory for my role, it helps you envision a long-term future in the position rather than you're just in this role and we'll figure it out as we go. Having those goals and expectations set down the line is really helpful to keep motivation and excitement building as I grow in the role.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. And again, congrats on the promotion. So next up, we have a question from Megan in Boston. And if you want to come on video and unmute yourself, look forward to digging in to answer your question. So Megan, welcome to Agency Office Hours.
Hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, Perfect. All right. Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks for bearing with me. I
Technology.
appreciate that.
Well, technology, it's the best. So
Yeah.
Megan, I understand you have a question about hiring. So specifically, when there's a lot of client demand and you know that you need people on the team to fulfill that demand, but the client money hasn't arrived yet, how do you deal with hiring to stay ahead of demand without hurting your profit margins? If you could elaborate a bit on your question, and then let's dig in on answering.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've been in operation as an agency. I was a freelancer before that, but we've been like truly an agency for about a year and a half, and we just hit the 20-person mark. And we kind of keep getting to this point where it's like we have exactly the right number of people. If we add one more client, it kind of breaks things. But if we don't add that client, then we don't have room if we have churn or and we're trying to kind of like strike the balance of when we bring new folks on, giving them enough time to ramp up to the way we do things and kind of get them used to all of our systems and processes and best practices in time for them to, do a good job for a new client.
Yeah.
And I know this is just a really common like agency challenge, is like having the right amount of business and the right amount of people. But I was just wondering if you had any best practices around how to strike that balance.
It is a common problem, but it is definitely one we want to solve. So let's dig in on that. A few things to keep in mind. First, it helps to recognize that there will always be some degree of clients coming in and leaving. So your team hopefully is not changing as often, but at some point there'll be a new client, or you'll subtract a client, things like that. And that's where the operations role comes in, or roles are especially helpful. At 20, it probably makes sense to have a dedicated operations manager, or you might have a project manager who spends a lot of their time on internal operations, resource management, things like that. It sounds like you do have someone in an operations lead role. Is that right?
Yes.
Great. That's good. If you didn't, you probably want to go back and hire them. And for everyone listening, by the way, if you don't have a full-time operations person, there's a question on when to hire them. They'll probably be part-time around 15. As you head to 20, 25, should be full-time. And if you've got 30 plus people and you don't have a full-time operations person and your head hurts, that is why. So, with all that in mind, part of what operations is doing, and of course, operations can include project management, internal HR recruiting, perhaps your self-marketing as well. Basically trying to load balance everything. Thinking across your team members, who's overworked, who is underworked, and trying to match client work accordingly. Take things off the plate of someone who's overloaded, pass it to someone who has capacity. And of course, there are challenges there. A lot of agencies look at a pod model where you've got a dedicated team with a fixed set of clients, kind of a mini agency within the agency. That's helpful for scaling. The problem is if you've got a client that's half the pod's budget and the client suddenly pauses, what do you do? It's not a good situation. Now, in that case, you can share that capacity to other teams, things like that, but there are pros and cons. So someone needs to be paying attention to what that load balancing looks like, or what the load looks like, so they can balance it. So you've got the operations person. That is a good first step. And you don't have to share the number out loud, but consider, how are your net margins relative to my 20 to 30% benchmark? That is, out of your revenue, ideally 20 to 30% of it is net profit margins after covering overhead and labor. If it is above 30%, agencies tend to be understaffed and everyone's overworked. So in that case, it's probably an opportunity to hire more people. On the other hand, if it's below 20%, it may mean that, there can be a wide variety of reasons, often undercharging, over-delivering, a little bit of both. You have less flexibility there. And in that case, you may need to do more billables with the team you have, which is a challenge. The other piece, or go ahead. It sounds like you Anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would say my talking about margins super specifically, my team is telling me understaffed, overworked, but when I look at the numbers, that doesn't make sense to me based on our margins. I don't think we're undercharging, but maybe we are.
Well, you can, when the team mentions they're feeling like they're overworked, you can dig deeper, and this is true for everyone listening, into your billables. So for instance, everyone ideally has a billable target, how many hours a week they should be billing. For some people, like operations and sales, it's 0. If someone is a subject matter expert, if they're working a 40-hour work week, not including lunch and things like that, someone could be billing 80% of their time if they're primarily a subject matter expert. If they're more client-facing, that tends to be lower, like a PM or an AM might be billing 20 to 25 hours a week. Key thing there is look at each person's target, which by the way, they should know, it shouldn't be a secret, and compare what are their actual billables in comparison. If someone's billables are at or above their target and they say that they feel overworked, yeah, I mean, they probably are, or certainly above. On the other hand, if they're only at half of their billable target and say they're overworked, you're going to want to dig in to understand what's going on. That doesn't always mean that they're underbilling. I mean, they're reporting underbilling. Sometimes they're doing billable work, but they're reporting it as non-billable because they feel bad about billing for it. Or maybe something took longer and they feel pressure to not record it as billable. The ideal is to get everyone feeling comfortable tracking billables as billable, and then someone above them, whether it's a project manager, operations head, or someone further up, makes a decision about what to bill or not. For instance, for developers, it is totally normal to figure out how to do something they've never done before. That's part of the job. And in general, figuring out the specifics are billable, unless it's something that is so baseline, they should have known that already. But most of development work is figuring out how to do new things, and that's billable. So, if there are gaps, and if someone is billing less than their target, don't automatically assume they're slacking off. Try to dig in to understand what's going on. It also could be there's a lag in sales, and maybe you don't have work for their particular skill set right now. That is all the more reason to get people cross-trained. And that's one way to help with that hiring ahead. Maybe, for instance, some new work comes in, you're going to hire a new full-time person, and you will, but you've got an existing team member who's cross-trained on that skill set, and they can start working on it initially. It's not permanent, it's not forever, but it's not like you have to sit around and do nothing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How would you recommend handling that with respect to the client facing kind of side of things? Because we try to be really conscious about, clients feeling like their team is constantly changing. That's not a good thing.
Clients don't love it. I would say the key is that the primary client facing person, who usually will be an account manager, and the secondary, who might be an account coordinator or potentially a project manager. For more technical agencies, the PM title really is the account manager. The ideal is that the primary person is not changing. And if they do change, the backup becomes the new primary, so the client feels continuity.
Okay.
So, it's okay if the subject matter experts are changing. Ideally, the client strategist is not changing. So the client doesn't feel like they're going to have to re-explain their business situation to every new strategist. But if your subject matter experts are changing, you've got some flexibility there. It's really most about the client-facing person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing to consider in terms of taking the risk of hiring ahead of demand, you can do that with freelancers. You basically say, we have some future work that is likely coming in later in the year. It's not definite, but given the number of proposals, odds are some of it will happen. We're lining up people that we like, that we want to work with later. We realize you can't guarantee you'll be available in 3 months, but we like you. We'd like to get you under contract so that if the work comes up, we figured out all the recruiting process, all the details, and if you're available, we can get you slotted in and start paying you immediately. I think of that as building a stable of freelancers. You might have 3 to 5 designers, 3 to 5 front-end developers, 3 to 5 back-end developers, things like that. Why 3 to 5? If it's more than 5, you're never calling on people. So why should they help if you haven't talked to them in 2 years? And having at least 3 means the odds are good that at least 1 will be available. The final thing to consider in terms of kind of overall benchmarks and strategy would be consider your agency's growth goals and growth style. So agencies tend to be on a continuum. I think of it at either end of the continuum as leaning toward either lifestyle or toward equity. So lifestyle is the owner or owners plan to keep running the agency for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And in that case, it tends to make sense to hire more slowly, right? Because part of running a lifestyle agency is you're trying to minimize stressors on your high quality of life, and hiring ahead of demand adds stress, where it's like, well, we're paying them, or are we going to have work to do? So you might push off hiring a bit more if you lean toward lifestyle. If you lean more toward equity, where the goal is to grow the agency fairly rapidly, lifestyle is still growing, but equity tends to be growing faster in order to have an exit. In that case, you're making some riskier choices and you're hiring a bit sooner. You also will probably lay people off sooner as well along the way. So consider where you and the leadership team fit on the lifestyle versus equity continuum. That can help you identify, how early to hire versus wait until you know for sure. And either way, I mentioned building the stable of freelancers. I would recommend adopting an always be recruiting mindset. That is, you're chatting with people, you're doing coffees, you're meeting with people, you're going to events, you're keeping an eye in, different discipline-specific Slack groups, Facebook groups, things like that. Like keeping an eye, who are the people that are always making insightful comments, that are asking good questions? Those are people to connect with, because at some point, odds are they are going to be looking for a new job. You want to be the first person who hears about it, rather than seeing the LinkedIn announcement that they've started a new job somewhere else. What's your reaction to all of that?
Yeah, we have a fantastic recruiter who is great at that, thankfully. So I definitely think we are always recruiting and we are always doing biz dev. I think we have those 2 things under control. It's I feel like it's something about like the size that we're at, where part of the challenge is that we are figuring out structure of teams, and we don't have enough AMs, which we don't call them that, to go around really.
Okay.
So that is, I think, maybe the biggest bottleneck. We do have a stable of freelancers. I would say that it's about 3 to 5 for the subject matter areas. Right. We also, our clients are in very, very technical industries. So it's a bit harder for us to ramp up a freelancer than it is to train up an internal team member.
That makes sense. And certainly the further ahead you can get, the better. It will never run perfectly smoothly, nothing ever changes, things like that. I talk about that in my project management 101 course, where part of a project manager's job is to turn chaos into order over and over and over again. Like it never goes away, chaos and order, but that also creates job security. If you're a project manager or an operations person, that chaos will never stop. Your job is to mitigate it. And the fact that it never disappears means if you're good at doing your job, you've got a job forever. So any specific actionables that are on your list kind of from here?
Yeah, I think digging into more, I am still not sure if my team is completely aware of what their billable targets are. And I think digging into how they're spending their time. They're certainly tracking time, but I think that's probably a good place for us to start.
Makes sense. Well, please let me know how it all goes. And for everyone who has tuned in for agency office hours today, thank you so much for stopping in, taking this time to help you and your agency grow more smoothly and more profitably. We're here every second Tuesday of the month on Zoom, answering your questions. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for future agency office hours, please include it when you RSVP. We'll let you know if you're on the list beforehand, and then I will answer it live. Karl Sakas here. Thank you, and good luck.